All right, so this week we pick up with vaYiqra, chapter 25, verse 27. So I'm going to back up to 26 and speak of a few things before we jump right in. My translation of verse 46, I think I said 27 a while ago, 46, we're starting with 47. 46 said, and they will be as one's own, as a person's own, for your children after you to inherit as a possession forever. They may serve you, but with your your brother, or your more broadly, your Torah observant relative, the Bnei Yisrael, the children of Israel, a man with his brother shall not rule him in cruelty. So it sounds like these are two separate things, but they're not. They're saying you treat them as your own, and if you're not allowed to treat your brother with cruelty, then obviously you cannot treat one who you treat as your own with cruelty, even though it's been more explicit about we're not allowed to treat people that way. But no one lives forever. And what did this just say? And they will be as one's own for your children after you to inherit as a possession forever. Well, you do realize that's not possible, right? There is no human servant who is going to live forever and be passed down, right? So you got to realize that's not what it said. You got to realize that's dumb, right? So what was supposed to last forever then? The Bnei Yisrael living in their land, obeying their God, the ability to hire foreign indentured servants, which is exactly who we're talking about, not any other servant, would last forever among the Jewish population, so long as the Jews adhere to the covenant and obey it. And it is all conditional on that, the whole entire law. And so, as a reminder, because I do believe I spoke of this last week, the Torah and the prophets, the entire Hebrew Tanakh, which is wrongly called the Old Testament by Christians, it would be okay, honestly, to call it the Old Testament and call the New Testament letters the New Testament if you actually understood Yirmiyahu. That's Jeremiah to most people, but that's not really his name. Yirmiyahu was his name. And he spoke of the new covenant, which would indicate an old covenant. And if you understood that through his eyes and understood what he was talking about a sacrifice, because in his day and age, a sacrifice and a covenant were exactly the same thing. Oh, but there's different words for this and that. No, there's not. Not in the Bible times. No, there's not. There are different words that mean the same thing in Hebrew. This is true. And we have words for covenant and words for slaughter and other things that are along that lines. But they are not separate things. They are just different words that are used in different times and different places, and they meant exactly the same thing. A covenant cannot exist without a sacrifice, and a sacrifice cannot exist without a covenant. Oh, but Rob, we're just uh, sacrificing this animal over here. We slayed this animal over here and we chopped him up and we're cooking it up just so, us and the neighbors are all getting together having a meal. Well, that's a sacrifice of friendship. That is the way that works. Um, It could be a sacrifice of well-being in that you had to do that so your family had something to eat. It is a covenant and a sacrifice both, anytime an animal is killed for food. So that's the first thing I think we need to get our heads around. But there was a sacrifice made at Sinai, and that sacrifice was not a perfect sacrifice. Why? Because it came with a Mashiach who was very much imperfect, whose blood could not cover uh, one's sin, as it were. I don't know why people don't know this. Even the Jews don't know this. The priests who made the sacrifice were in the Hebrew Bible called Mashiach, because they're the ones that perform the sacrifice, that cover, and they, not the animal, not the blood, the Mashiach is the covering for the sacrifice. It says it right there in Leviticus. You can read Hebrew, look it up. You'll find I'm telling the truth. So those are very imperfect, because at best, they only cover you for a year, or perhaps just one particular sin. For instance, we haven't gotten there yet, but what about the cities of refuge? Refuge? Refuge. Yeah, I knew I said that wrong. These were places when you killed somebody and it was an accident, you had to run to that city and you had to stay there under one of two conditions, either for the rest of your life, or if the person who was the high priest at the time of the incident dies before you do, at that point, because that Mashiach has paid the price for your sin, you can go home. This has been with Judaism from the very beginning. So the old covenant came with a sacrifice that was very flawed, especially given that the covenant had to be in effect. The Jews had to be living according to it for it to be in effect. And without it, now what you going to do? So then Yirmiyahu says, but God's going to make a new sacrifice, a new covenant. Now, not a new set of rules. It's a new sacrifice, i.e. covenant. If we'd translated it sacrifice, it wouldn't have messed everybody's head the way it has. But think of it as a sacrifice, because the second sacrifice would be made by a Mashiach whose own sacrifice and blood was in fact enough to cover the sin of everyone, everywhere, for all of past, present, and future. It was that pure, right? That's what he's talking about. So if we understand it to the degree that the old sacrifice was imperfect, but workable, but imperfect, where the new sacrifice is once and for all, then we could call them both, because the one side talks about the old system, the old way that we did it. And again, I've said it before, it wouldn't hurt for us to do that. Will it cover our sins? Probably not. But we don't do it for that purpose. We do it for a remembrance. Look up any of that stuff about sacrifice, and you'll see that the whole point in it is to do it for a remembrance, for the feasts and the festivals and all that. It's all about a remembrance, right? So the sacrificial system, I don't see any reason why, even if you believe that Mashiach has come and that sacrifice has been made, and thus the new covenant, let's say, era has begun. It doesn't matter whether you believe that or not. There is no reason why the old sacrificial system wouldn't still work. God is eternal. He does not change his mind. So if you just want to be forgiven, for 1 year at a time, go for it. You probably be okay, so long as all the other, Israel is living by the law, blah, 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 then you'll be just fine. So good luck getting that to happen, right? Because they don't live by God's law, which is not a good thing. Yeah, there are people there that obey God's law to the best of their ability, but the law of the land is not the Torah, and God set it up as the Torah is, in fact, the law of the land of Israel. So until Israel gets to the point where they let God be God and obey God because he is God, and they have a covenant with God, I think any sacrifice that we could make as humans would be of no value beyond the remembrance of what happens and why for a sin sacrifice, the innocent blood that is shed because of the crappy things we do or don't do. You know what I'm saying? I mean, I don't see it being a bad thing doing it for that reason. But in the end, if on the other hand you believe that Yeshua, because I wouldn't give anybody else that credit, but if you believe Yeshua was in fact the image of God Almighty walking on earth and not God having a child, half God, half child with some woman, but you believe that God was the child who grew up and walked on earth, if you believe that, then you believe that his sacrifice is pure because that's the blood of God that dropped out on the chuppah from that cross, because there was that cloud on the ground that at Sinai was in the air, but now on the ground with Mashiach. So if you believe that, then you know that sin sacrifice is covered if we obey God. If we don't obey God, the New Testament writers tell us you have no shot. There is no sacrifice for you if you don't obey God. Because the sacrifice is for the obedient, not the disobedient. It is, I should say more clearly, the sacrifice is for the disobedience of those who wish to be and try to be obedient, because we all fall short. We all stammer and stumble and trip up and do things and don't do things that we should have. But that's the beauty of God's law. It gives us a way to make things right. And 90% of the time, it's just get back up and get back on the path. And that's all there is. Few times, there are some things you have to do. Anyway, that's for a different time. So this is about one other thing I think I wanted to point out here was with this thing about these particular people that could be hired as servants so long as we're obedient and the Torah is the law of our land. The idea jumped out of my head, what I was going to say to you. Oh, that would mean that they are the only people that can be hired. That'll probably come up later. So let's go ahead and get started on 27. Literally in English, and I do mean very literal, it says, and if acquired hand, foreigner, and dwell with you, and become poor, and will be leased, sold in English, but leased, Torah observant relative you, with he, and will be leased to foreigner, dwell with you, or to member family, dweller. Okay, you do realize this isn't a whole sentence here. This is a partial sentence. So we won't get the whole understanding from this one verse. But it's veki tasig, so and for or and if or and because. It could be any of those three. The sentence will lay itself out. We'll know which one before it's gone very far. So, and if acquire, um, it's of the idea to move oneself, to reach, to attain to something, to achieve something, to overtake someone, to acquire someone or something. So in some way you're going to acquire, then the next word is yad. So you're going to acquire with, in your hand or with your hand. This just says yad, so it doesn't make that clear. But I wanted to throw some things at you this week. If I say, Yad im et David, literally that's hand my with David. Hand my with David. Did you know that's how it's said in biblical Hebrew? And what does it mean? I help David. Here the hand, the Yodi im et David. My hand with David. I help him. If you say Yodi Yita Beth David, hand my is in David. Hand my is in David. That means I'm against him. Yad Yahweh El David. Hand Yahweh, no, it's not El, it's all David, is on David. That means Yahweh himself helps David. His hand is on him. A while ago, it was hand with him, means that, me saying I help him. But this here says hand on him. And both of those mean someone's helping him, right? How about Natan Yad David? Literally, that's give hand David. What's that? What's that mean? It's to pledge your loyalty to the giver. So in other words, David is giving you something and you're pledging your loyalty to him. The idea here is I'm trying to show you that in Hebrew, the word yod has an effect on body parts. I shouldn't say that. The body parts in Hebrew have an effect on the Hebrew words. Because you can talk about your hand in all these different ways. You could say your hand is upon somebody, your hand is with somebody, your hand did this or that to somebody, and that turns it into an idiomatic phrase. The same thing happens. My eye is on somebody, my eye is with somebody, my eye is against somebody, whatever. These body parts, ears do the same thing. Your hands, your ears, your mouth does the same thing. Your eyes do the same thing. Your mind, any parts, body parts have a specific effect on the Hebrew words to which they are connected. And that's really important for us to understand when we begin to look at sentences where it says you acquire hand, your hand acquired something, right? Think about it. That doesn't literally mean that your hand was somehow able to purchase something. No, probably your money or some item you're trading with somebody, that gave you the ability. It wasn't the hand. right? So we have to know these things about the body parts, particularly in Hebrew, in biblical Hebrew. So if your hand acquire ger, that's a foreigner. And I know that there's all kinds of other things they say about that word. It becomes a stranger, blah, blah, blah. No, it's a foreigner. And remember, a foreigner is not what we think of. A foreigner can be somebody born in your land, speaks your language, blah, blah, blah. But he's not living according to the law of God, and you are living according to the law of God. That makes that person a foreigner. And you're probably going to call that person born in your country whose line, his genetic line can be traced all the way back to Father Abraham, but he does not live according to the law. He's going to be called by the Jews of the biblical period a Goy, Gentile, as it's often said in English. So if your hand acquire a foreigner, vetoshav, and he dwells, he's dwelling, he's living. I bet you can guess what's going to say next, right? Imach, with you. So he's dwelling with you. He lives in the same place you do. So if you live in Jerusalem and he lives in Jerusalem, he's dwelling with you. If you live, on 149 First Street and he lives on 149 First Street, he's dwelling with you, right? Because he's living in the room next door or a room, a 10 out back, whatever. Umach, and that person grows poor. And to grow poor means maybe you've overextended your credit and now you're essentially bankrupt. You have more going out than coming in. You have grown poor. So you can't think of it as somebody who started off with nothing and now is heading in that, somehow it's getting worse. No, this is somebody who had something and now is looking at losing it all. That's the idea here. Ahicha, which is from the base word ach, which is where we get brother. But like I said, more widely expanded, this is a relative. This is your Torah observant, their Torah observant. That makes you a relative. That makes you a brother, right? There's more to it than just some immediate family in the idea. Then it says imo, which means with he, ve ni mechar, and will be leased. Remember, I've changed that to leased because sale is the wrong word. No human in the Bible is literally bought and sold. It's a lease because at the most you get 6 years out of it and it's over. There is no human being that can be purchased, and that human being literally belongs to somebody else. That's a terrible way to look at that. And the Bible does not ever say anything of such nonsensical ideas. So it's to be leased leger, to a foreigner. So this person is your brother in some way, shape, or form, whether it's by religion, by blood, by the you live in Israel, as does this person, born and raised in Israel like you. That makes that person a brother biblically. So however this person drops into being a brother, and he's about to be leased to a foreigner, now we're seeing that we have a problem. Okay, so this is a foreigner, to a foreigner, and then it says toshav, so dwelling, foreigner dwelling, imach, with you. It doesn't mean in the same house necessarily, though it could. But again, in the same town, in the same general area, in the same country. They dwell with you, or let's say among you. if you will. Then it says O, which in Hebrew is how we say or, this or that. We say O. And it's spelled with just a single O, not a zero, but an O, a letter O. Then it says le eker, which it's they say member in the older Bibles. It's of a root or a shoot. It's of offspring, metaphorically used of a man of a foreign race who had settled in the Holy Land, according to Leviticus 25:47. Wow, what a coinky-dink. I'm guessing I got that from Jusinius. I know I don't just make stuff up. So it has to be something Jusinius said. I mean, it could be someone else, but I think it's probably him. Then it says mishpachat, which is your word for family. Then it says ger, foreigner. So you could say a foreign family. All right. I've said all that to say this. Here's my translation. And if a foreigner is able to purchase and he dwells among you and becomes poor, your Torah observant relative with him, and will be leased to the foreigner who dwells among you, or to a member of the family of the dweller. Clearly, when a Torah observant Jew owes a foreigner who lives among the Jews money and is not or cannot pay his debt, he will now be leased into indentured servitude until the debt is paid off to this foreigner or one of his family members. So it's half an idea. Could be even a third or a fourth of an idea. We'll just have to see. But that's, comma. We have not finished. How about vechi tasig yad ger, which literally means, and if attain hand ger. That's a dweller. So we get that from verse 8, by the way. No, I'm looking at the wrong one. And if attain hand ger, and if a ger can afford. If you attain by the hand, I knew I was leaving something out. If you attain by the hand, that means you can afford something. In verse 8, we had al pi asher tasig yad, which was upon mouth that gained hand. Again, I was going to go into that more deeply, but I think not today. Again, just remember that when we begin to use the words for body parts in sentences, you have to know that that's going to change the sentence most of the time. Every once in a while, we really are talking about a body part, but mostly we're not. This word, a hand, being used in these sentences is not speaking of the body part. The hand signifies, in imagery, strength. You say the hand or the arm, it doesn't matter. You're talking about strength, power, might. So if you're using the hand to attain something, that means you were able to pay for it because you were able to work for the money, gain them, save the money, and then pay for it with the money that you attained with your hand. It doesn't mean that you worked for it. You made something with your hands, or you plowed your field with your hands. It doesn't mean that, because you could be an attorney and be able to purchase something. Sorry, thought I was going to sneeze. So it's not something that you literally did with your hands. It just means ability. You had the ability, and so they use the word hand. Okay, in verse 48, we have will be leased, redemption shall be for him, one from your Torah observant relative, his he redeemed they. So probably at this point, you're starting to get it already. Achare, which means after, behind, that sort of thing. Ni mechar. After, it kind of means will sell, or will, in our case, lease, pay off. It can be all kinds of things like that. Geula, redemption. So this is going to be redemption. That means you're paying something off. Because to redeem something in the Bible here is to pay it off. Tia, it shall be. Le'o, remember I break up lo because it sounds like a different word. Le'o, so it's to he or it. Echad, so to it one, or to him one. Meme chayv. Well, believe it or not, that's ach. That's your Torah observant family member. That's your brother. So you have the meh at the front of the word, which means from. It's a part taken from the whole. It can be of, and then the eve sound at the end means his. From brother his. So to one of, from his brothers. That's how that's literally said in Hebrew. Yigeu lenu. So we're back to the word for redeem. It has a few things added to it. The he, because the yod at the front makes it masculine, and then it's the word for redeem, and then we have the vav at the end, meaning they. So they redeem. We say he redeemed they in Hebrew, if you say those words in English, but in English we say they redeem. We don't say the he first. So your translation is pretty simple. After will be released, redemption shall exist to him. The Jew who is indentured to a foreigner. If he has the money, if he was able to attain it in his hand, if he's able to pay it off, redemption will exist to him. In other words, you will take his money and let him go, right? Of course, then the rest of it is from any of his relatives, he may be redeemed. So we're saying, if I'm reading this right, that if he can attain it within his own hands, he is allowed to pay it off. And if any of his Torah observant brothers can pay it off, they are allowed to do so. You cannot stop somebody from being redeemed. Now, it's very specific here. The only redeemer can be the person or a Torah observant Jew. Why? Because if you allow somebody from a foreign country who does not live according to God's law to redeem somebody, you're literally selling that person to them to be their property. You are not allowed to do that if you are a child of God. Okay. All right. I missed the number. Okay. We're all the way up to 49. Look at that. Okay, so very literally, or uncle he, or son uncle he redeemed they, or from near flesh family he redeemed they, or attained hand he, and redeemed. Kind of says the same thing. We have our Hebrew word, which in English we say or, this or that, right? And the very first word is or, which ought to tell you this is still part of the previous verse. We haven't gotten to the period yet. We've had 2 commas, but now we're at this may be a period, maybe it's just going to be another comma, but now we're up to a 3rd verse that is part of the same sentence. Okay, so we begin with O, dodo, like dodo bird, dodo. That the do is an uncle. The Hebrew word do in the Bible means uncle. Dode, I'm sorry, not do, dode. Then if you say do, you're saying uncle he, literally, but in English we would say his uncle. Okay, so or his uncle, and it's already said he can do it, or brother can do it. Now we're at the point of or an uncle. And then after that, it's O Ben. Let me see what the next word. Do. Or his uncle's son. Right? You see that this is a continuation of the previous, right? Ye get alenu. They may redeem. If they are able, if they have the money, they also are allowed to redeem. Oh, remember, or misher. That means from near. Besaro, oh, near of flesh. We would say maybe close family member, or in this case, it's going to be a Jew, right? Because the person who's indentured to this dweller who lives in the land, who is not one of us, it's going to be Jewish. He was Jewish, so it's going to be somebody of Jewish flesh. Maybe we would say DNA now, I don't know, but they didn't have that back then. Mishpachto, from his family. And you could split this up into 2 different things. Someone near of flesh and someone of his family. Not really what's going on here, but near of flesh means somebody from his family. They're being a little more, or God is, a little more specific here. Ye get alenu. They may redeem. That's your word for redeem, right? Oh, he siga. If he's able, gado, hand he, vet nigal, believe it or not, that's the word for redeem again. And if his hand is able to redeem, all right, kind of sounds like maybe we're not finished with the sins yet, but it could be. So here's my translation. Remember, we're going on from the previous sentence here, or his uncle, or his nephew, the uncle's son, or his uncle, or his nephew, they may redeem, or from any close member of his family, from his family may redeem. He really kind of did say that twice. Let me make that a little more clear. I don't like my translation here. His uncle or his son, they may redeem, or from any close. Oh, I see why I did that, because it was basar, it's the flesh. Anyone close to his flesh from his family may redeem him, or if he is able to pay off his debt, able to attain hand, if he is able to pay off his debt, he is also able, he is also redeemed. In other words, you have to let him pay it off and let him go. So, wow, there's a lot of opportunity here to get that bill paid off and get that family member or brother, because we all serve the same God, out from under this burden. Now, here's a note I added. Only the Jewish man was for lease, not his family, nor his property. The price of redemption is based on the debt. Thus, depending on the amount owed, a man could work as little as a few hours up to the rest of his life, right? It depends on the debt, and however long it takes you to work off that many hours to equal the amount of the debt, that's how long you're going to be doing this, right? However, even if the debt is so large that a man would have to work the rest of his life to pay it off, the debt is automatically paid off in the year of Yovel at the latest. It's in the 7th year otherwise. It's paid off, remember? Further, if the man owed a debt that would take a lifetime to pay off, he would be released from his debt. Oh, I think I just said that, in the Yovel, or in the 7th year. It's just over. That's all you can get out of the guy, which I believe is a lot of the reason why people see Jews as tightwads, because we're not going to loan you that kind of money. That's dumb. I mean, yeah, you might loan your own child more money than you know he can ever pay back, because you're going to tell yourself, well, he's going to inherit all I got anyway, so what's the difference, right? I mean, you might see something like that, but you're not going to see them loaning more money than a neighbor could ever pay off and things like that, because we know we can't get it back. And the whole purpose of the loan is to get it back, right? Then I have this other note. Yeshua's death was the price he, as Redeemer, had to pay for the sins of the world, as it's called in the New Testament, which all that means is his debt paid the price to reinstate the broken covenant between God and man. He did not come to save anyone else. He said it with his own mouth. I am not come, but for the lost sheep of the house of Yisrael. No one else in the world has anything to do with that. If you're not from the house of Yisrael, he didn't come for you, period. He said it himself. So this idea of the whole world is nonsensical. The Jews called the whole of Yisrael the world. Do you know why? Because God made a covenant with the Jews. That covenant gave the Jews the land of Yisrael. And that covenant was based on their obedience. That covenant came in their language. It was written out, not just in their language, but it used their idioms in the law itself. Everything about what God did and what the Hebrew Bible has written has the whole world of Judaism within the boundaries of the land that God gave us. That is what the Jews called the world. Now, if you have to pay for the sin of the world, well, you're saying the sin of the whole Jewish nation, which is very obvious. Their covenant was ended and they had no covenant. And that made them part of, let's say, the bigger world, the rest of the world. But with Yeshua coming, he did not come for the bigger world. He came for the little world, the Jewish world. And he said it with his own lips. Okay. I put a note in here I've forgotten about. I wrote this so long ago, and so I may repeat myself a little bit. Yeshua's death was the price he, as Redeemer, had to pay for the sins of the world. In other words, to reinstate the covenant that was broken between God and his people. However, the death does not pay the price of redemption unless there is a familial connection. Redeemer, by God's law, had to be family. The initial problem is that there is no actual Jewish bloodline. Did you hear me? There is no actual Jewish bloodline. Avraham, known as Abraham, is called the father of the Yehudim, father of the Jews. He's thought of as the founder of Judaism. But Abraham was from Ur. I can't even roll my R after I make the U sound. As people call it these days in America. Ur. There, I got it. It's a town in the land of Chaldea, as it's known these days. Abraham was Kasdi. He was Chaldean. He was not Yehudim. Abraham sent his servant to Chaldea. He said, "Go unto my country and to my kindred," Genesis 24:4, "to find a wife for his son, Yitzhak," that's Isaac. Her name was Rivka, also known as Rebecca. Isaac and Rivka had a son whose name was Yaakov, or Jacob. He married Rachel, known as Rachel, his mother's niece, also a Chaldean. Jacob's name was changed to Yisrael by God himself. This compounded word literally means he fought with God. The root of the first part of this name is Sarah. It means to fight. The second part of this name is El, and that means God. We changed the meaning to he who wrestled with God because the man, M-A-N, a human, whom gave Yaakov his new name, went on to say, as the reason why he gave the new name, "For you wrestled with God and with man and Yaakov and prevailed." Additionally, the word avak, which means wrestle, is actually used in verses 24 and 5 though not in verse 28, where the explanation is given as to why his name was changed to Yisrael. Yaakov, Jacob, was given this name because he prevailed in that he wrestled with God until he received his blessing. In other words, he did not give up when the going got tough, according to Genesis 38:28. Yaakov named the place in which the wrestling match took place, the fight, Peniel. Peniel, because he knew that the man, the human with whom he wrestled, was a physical manifestation of Yahweh, God Almighty. Yaakov and Rachel, Jacob and Rachel, had two sons who became known as the founders of the 12 tribes of Israel. Thus, to this point, everyone from Abraham to the 12 sons of Yaakov shared the same Chaldean bloodline. How does a Chaldean family become Jewish? Does the argument that Judaism is made up of a race of people who share the same bloodline up to the Tanakh, does it stand up to any scrutiny here? Exodus chapter 12, verse 38 tells us that a mixed multitude left Mitzrayim, also called Egypt, on the day that the children of Yisrael left there. A mixed multitude. That means people of every nation, color, and creed. A mixed multitude. Of course, I've kind of already said this, but this means that the people from many different nations, not just Jews, left for the promised land. More importantly, most of the children these foreign nations entered the promised land. Okay, most importantly, most of the children from these foreign nations entered the promised land as Jews. The second wife of Moshe was Cushite. That means she was, and I don't know how else to say this, dark, black-skinned Ethiopian. How do you say that? Ethiopian woman. That doesn't match up with a Chaldean, does it? Moshe, let's see. The word Ethiopian by itself means blackness. She was a black woman. If I am wrong, Boaz, the elder of his town, and the nearest kinsman were also wrong as well. Why? Because these laws applied only to the Jews. Boaz told the nearest kinsman that he would have to marry Ruth, not Ruth, but Ruth, as her name actually should be pronounced, if he redeemed Naomi's inheritance. If I'm right about what I just said, Boaz agrees with what I just said. So either he and I both are wrong here, or you've got a problem. Next, the elders and the kinsmen. They call him so-and-so in Hebrew. They don't even give him a name. The elder and the kinsman, I should say elders and the kinsman, did not disagree with Boaz. They were in agreement that Robert Allen's right with what he just said. Ruth was from Moab. You get Moab with a B instead of a V. I don't know why. She was neither born nor raised in Yisrael. She most certainly did not possess Jewish blood. but she was accepted as a Jew by all of these men. You guys know why? Well, she said it with her own mouth. She said, "Your God is my God. Your people are my people." She didn't say will be like you read in the English translations. Holy smokes. Look at the Hebrew. It says that she said, "Your God is my God. Your people are my people." How is that possible? How did this Chaldean family become Jewish? How did this Moabite woman become a Jew? Well, they all did it in exactly the same way. The word Jew comes from the Hebrew word Yehudi. The first part of that word, it's a compound word. The first part is God's name. The second part, Hud, means imitator. Imitator of Yahweh. Well, what does that mean? Well, these people knew if you live according to the covenant, then you are imitating God. Because the law of God, the covenant, as God called it, his covenant, that's God's lifestyle. So if we live the same lifestyle as God, we go from whatever nationality we were born and convert and become Jewish, Yehudi. Well, Jewish would be Yehudim, but Yehudi. We become a Jew, just like the rest of them did. I am out of time. Shalom v'shalom.
The blessing, vaYiqra. Yevarecha Yahweh v'yish merecha. Ya'er Yahweh panai v'lecha v'hunecha. Yisa Yahweh panai v'lecha v'yasim lecha shalom. And in English, may Yahweh cause you to lie down so that you may rest. May he touch and caress you. May he prepare you for what is ahead. May he watch over you. May he keep you from harm. May he cause goodness to grow in you and take away the bad. May he arrange your life and cause you to flourish. May he cheer you up and gladden your heart. May he cause his light to shine through you. May he show you tenderness, favor, and love in his presence. May he show you kindness and be delicate towards you. May he show you his generosity, mercy, compassion, and desire for you as it comes forth from the depths of his soul. May he lift you out of your pit and deliver you from the things that hold you prisoner. May he draw you to his chest and cast his eyes on yours. May he show you his love and desire for you as he cradles you in his arms. May he bear your punishment and pardon you of your sin. May he take you for his bride. May he establish a foundation in you. May he place his name on your heart and mind and make your body his temple. May you be his treasure. May you always be on his mind. May he draw you near and comfort you when you are afraid. May he assure you there is nothing to fear because he is with you. May you and all that concerns you be at peace because he is your friend. Amen.